Okay, I am just getting the Facebook Live set up. And they don't let you can't do it in advance, which is like a bummer. So I have to get that in, and then I'll let everybody in. Let's see. Got lots of people waiting. Woo, 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 woo.
Okay, I found Benita's number. I'm sure it's just because she's really enthusiastic. Oh, what happened? There you are. Okay. I can't be trusted. I'm like a techno pathetic.
Okay, I'll look out for you.
Yes.
We're just gonna get one. We're almost ready. Just getting this. This is so fun. I mean, it's exciting. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm really excited because everybody was saying, "Oh my God, how can you do that?" And I said, "Everybody is wonderful." I said, "I'm not worried about them. I worry about me, but I don't." I'm just.
I don't see her. Oh, there she is.
You're just.
I'm letting Benita in.
Oh, you see her? Great. Okay.
And so she's joining, and
then we're all here.
Okay, and then I'm going to. There's Benita.
Yay, Benita! Hi. Oh, I'm so excited to meet everybody who I didn't already know. So. Yay.
Okay, I'm gonna admit everyone now.
Okay.
Everybody's coming in.
Oh wow! Look at this. Wow. Cool. Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. Meeting is now live streaming. We're on, baby. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie Ralston. I'm the co-founder of Next Tribe. I want to welcome everyone to this special event we're doing. This means so much to me, and I'm so happy that Next Tribe can play a part, because I really believe that women like us, they were smart, engaged, we're curious, and we want to know. There's a lot that divides us right now, but there's a lot that also brings us together, and we're focusing on what brings us together. And I'm so glad that Sherry and Matzenstein came to me. She's a New York therapist and podcaster. She hosts a podcast called Sherapy, and she just said, let's try to do something. I've talked to women from both sides, and it's so important to recognize their humanity. And I think that's what we're trying to do tonight. So we have 3 women who have supported Trump this year, and 3 who are on the Biden side. And so the aim is to not convince each other of who's right, who's wrong. It's to understand each other. And there's a big difference. So you have a conversation in a different way if you're trying to understand versus making the other person wrong and you right. So we are here to learn and expand our brains. And I'm going to let Sherry, I just want to say, we're keeping it civil. Those who are watching can write comments and questions in the chat. And then when we have time at the end, I'll pick a few of those questions. But I really want to plead with you to be respectful and no name calling, because if there's something that's edging on just being too inflammatory or upsetting, I'll give you a warning in private, and then after that, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And it's just, please just know that this is a time for expanding our minds and our hearts. So I'm going to turn this over to Sherry, and I appreciate so much that you're doing this, and take it from here, Sherry.
And thanks, Jeannie, for giving us a home for this. So I'm a New York-based psychotherapist, author, and the moderator for tonight. And again, this is a dialogue between 3 Trump voters and 3 Biden voters. And this is not about changing minds, but respectfully listening to the viewpoints of those who behave differently. That's the only way that we can start healing. This is not about demonizing anybody, but accepting our differences and finding common ground. And the roots of this Zoom, of this idea, for me probably began after Trump's election 4 years ago, because it cast me into mourning for our country. That was my reaction. And I visited Michigan with my boyfriend for a wedding. That's where he's from. And I stopped off to get my hair blow dried, because then I had hair. And then what do? You get your hair blow dried if you're going to an event. And the stylist was a Trump voter. And initially I was just appalled and horrified because I was just getting over that he'd won. But instead of shutting down, I was curious about who she was and her reasoning. And she was equally curious. She'd never met anybody from New York. And we shared our beliefs and our feelings. And at the end of it, we hugged. And I've always wished I had gotten her information after that. I really did. But would have asked her to this, frankly. So this isn't about we're going to just say kumbaya and forget everything. But if all we do is hate and judge, we get nowhere. So I'm going to introduce our 6 panelists. So, and I'm hoping I get everybody's name right. Okay. Karen Hogg. She is a Texas-based former attorney and a lifelong Republican. She teaches high school government and economics. And for her, the big picture is freedom and a belief that smaller government is best. Trump was not her first choice, but to her, it came down to voting for policy. And she has been called a lot of names these past 4 years, but tonight she's here to hear the other side. Leslie Elliott is from Austin. She is a regional sales director for the, I hope I get the spelling of this right, OETKER collection of hotels, which sound amazing. And when this is all over, I hope we can all visit and have like a pop. And she grew up in a conservative household, but she voted for Obama twice, but the second time she had reservations. She thinks that Trump has done a good job for our country, but that he hasn't been treated fairly, especially in terms of what he's done for the economy. And she says Trump voters always feel judged. And she's had some terrible experiences with the radical left, including being physically attacked by a close friend who threw her up against a bench for voting for Trump. And that's kind of why we're here. So Leslie wants to be accepted for her humanity, and she hopes we can all move together in a peaceful direction. Benita Tolati, I hope I'm saying your name right. She's in Washington. She is a project attorney. She's an Indian American and an independent moderate. She voted for Hillary in 2016. On the roots of her voting for Trump earlier this month started when she participated in the Women's March in January 2017. I was there. I didn't see you. And some women asked her, are you from this country or another country? To her, that meant they didn't consider her an equal. She was born in Queens, as I was. So she believes that there is an assumption out there that minorities automatically vote for Democrats. She's pro-choice, but to her, the Affordable Care Act was just ruinous. And so she voted for Trump. Dr. Karen Tamarius lives in Berkeley, California. She's an expert in political psychology, psychiatry, and she is the founder of Smart Politics, which is all about helping those on both sides speak to one another and hear one another and learn from one another. So basically, she teaches us, people on the left, because we really need this, to have more productive and persuasive conversations with people across the political spectrum. Sarah Gilbert Fox is a New York City artist and democratic socialist. And I asked her to join the panel because I read her Facebook post that was directed at her liberal friends, saying after 4 years of feeling so scared, angry, and hated, it's understandable to want to post gleeful "fuck you Trump" memes. But at some point, we need to be cognizant that while we're rejoicing, a lot of people are hurting. Mara Gordon is from upstate New York. She is left of center. She's married to a registered Republican who also voted for Biden. She's a healthcare worker and a humanitarian at heart, is what she said to me. She used to be an avid CNN watcher and New York Times reader, but she feels those sources have swung far too left of center. She engages in friendly dialogue with Trump voters, and she believes that ceasing to demonize one another would be a big win. So if we can just do a small steps toward that from what we're doing tonight, I think that's great. So our ground rules, one woman at a time will talk, no interrupting, crosstalk. I know I'm not going to get it from you guys, but name calling, denigrating, questioning anybody's motives. We're future focused. How do we get out of this mess? Obviously, this is not going to be about reinventing the wheel in an hour, but one small step at a time eventually will get us to the moon. So after around 40 minutes, we're going to take some questions from viewers. The last 8 to 10 minutes are going to be devoted to getting, to discussing where we go from here. Jeannie Ralston, the editor of Next Tribe and our host for the hour, she has some really wonderful ideas on that point. And I'm really grateful to the 6 women who are participating tonight. Everyone is a warrior to participate in something like this in such a hostile atmosphere. You guys are here to start bridge building. And frankly, the audience is here for that too, or they wouldn't be here. So I look forward to us civilly exchanging our viewpoints. So first, I'm going to ask each woman in turn to talk a bit about what she wants our listeners to know about her and why she's here tonight, essentially, what made her say yes to the invitation. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to put like a 2-3 minute time limit on the intros because we just don't have that enough time tonight. And we'll kind of let you know when there's just a minute left. So I'm gonna start with Karen Tamarius. And I asked you to come because you are a peacemaker and a reacher across the aisle. So. I'm not hearing you. Now I hear you. Right.
Can you hear me now?
Technology, great. Now we hear you. Terrific. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Karen Marius, Smart Politics, and I teach people how to have more productive.
Karen?
Yeah.
Karen. It's hard to hear you, but like it was earlier. Can you, whatever you did before, will you fix that?
Okay. Well, sorry about that.
Technology.
Okay. Does that work better?
Yes, much better. Great.
Sorry about that. Again, I'm Karen, Smart Politics. I teach people how to have conversations across difference. I think if there's one message I want people to walk away from tonight, it's that you can hold bridge building and advocacy simultaneously. You don't have to put aside your beliefs in order to have a conversation with someone you disagree with. That is what I try to teach progressives, is they can believe very strongly in their values and their policies and their candidates and still treat other people respectfully. I try in every conversation I have with someone who is across the aisle or just simply views things differently than I do, I try to learn something from them. There is always something I can take away from those conversations. I don't have all the answers. And this is how democracy works. We have a conversation to figure out the best way to move forward together. It's not about one side overpowering the other side.
Thank you, Karen. Leslie Elliott, you're on.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this, Sherry and Jeannie. It's great to meet all of you. And, my mother is a Democrat and she's never voted for a Republican in her life. She's one of the John F. Kennedy Democrats. She will never vote for a conservative. But then on the other hand, I had my grandmother, who I looked up to so much, was a conservative. So they were on the complete opposite. I have friends that are Democrats. I have friends that are, border on socialism, and I love them very much, and then I have my conservative friends. My thing is, if we can have a conversation, which I feel like I can with my best friends, and not want to kill each other, we're doing something to help one another. And we have managed to continue to stay friends, even though we have different political beliefs. And I'm glad that we are all getting together here tonight because there is a lot of healing, I mean, there's so much healing that needs to take place. And Sherry mentioned, I was attacked by a family friend, and that we usually have Thanksgiving with and Christmas. And I've known her husband's family since I was 11 years old. We won't be doing that this year, because of what happened. And I just want us to heal and grow and know that we can all live in the same universe without wanting to kill each other, So.
Thank you, Leslie. Karen Hogg. Did I get that right?
I was pretty close. It's Hogg.
Okay.
That's okay. Everybody, I just say just Karen. It's fine. But in 2020, I don't even want to say Karen. So, I think one of the things Sherry had already mentioned, the part kind of the reason why I think the way that I do, and I think that's really important to understand. And I teach my students this, is understand why you believe what you believe. And so, like Sherry saying, I'm pro-life. I believe that liberty is best served with a smaller government, with a local government that is more accountable to the people. One of the biggest things that I get frustrated with, I think, is that there is a perception, and it's been around for a long time, even before Trump, that Republicans are cold and mean and all this stuff. And so, for example, when a friend of mine who I've known for a very long time, and I said something about being pro-life, and she just attacked me about, you guys just want to, make the woman have the baby, but you don't do anything to actually help her. And I was like, no, we just go about it differently. We donate to the pregnancy center that helps women with diapers and car seats and, everything, parenting classes and all of these things. And so just because we vote against a government program to do things, that doesn't mean that we're evil people. And even like my economics student, like the minimum wage, right, is a thing that's been in the news a lot. And I look at it as a conservative and I go, one, why does the government get to tell me what I get to charge for my labor? But there's policy issues, like it causes a higher rate of unemployment, but for those people who have a job, it benefits them. So there's legitimate policy, so I look at it as a conservative and I go, don't do it because you're going to increase unemployment. But that doesn't mean that I'm an evil person and I don't want people to make more money. And so I think that there's a big misnomer out there. And I've, over the last few years, I've been called racist and I've been unfriended and all for things, that aren't true. And I'm as a conservative, I'm frustrated by a lot of, the like we've seen resist, and not my president. And, let's cheer when Madonna says she wants to blow up the White House or whatever, and I just, as a conservative, I go, I don't, how do you heal from that when the rhetoric has gotten to that? And I'm not saying conservatives never say bad stuff. I'm sure they do. But I don't know where we go from here. And the other thing, even Jeannie mentioned a Facebook post that she had that just kind of erupted. And I freely admit to being part of the erupting. But what I noticed was that we don't even have the same facts a lot of times. I can look at a CNN article and a Fox News article about the very same thing, and they are very different. And so I think part of moving past it is we've got to be open to looking at other things besides just our normal news stream that we always tend to go to and our default. And social media, of course, doesn't help with that either, right? Because it feeds us what it thinks we want to hear.
Thank you, Karen. And yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about that whole we get our our news sources from different places thing, because that's a huge part.
Thanks. I probably went longer than 2 minutes. I apologize.
Sarah Fox. Do we wait, Sarah? Not hearing you yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Loud and clear. Good. Okay.
Karen, you sounded like me, only on the exact opposite side.
There you go.
So the post you're talking about that I made was basically after Biden won, he was declared the winner, I ran up on the roof and I started screaming and banging pots and pans, and I was so excited. And then after that initial elation, I immediately felt or remembered the pain of 2016. It was horrible. And my compassion kicked in. And a lot of my friends are, well, you're being too nice. What about those children that were being locked up in deportation and losing their parents, and people who voted for Trump condone that behavior? And maybe, but to say that and just leave it there doesn't lead us to the part of the conversation that will keep it from happening again. And we need to understand the other person's pain. And how were they receiving that information from their media source? As Karen says, what was their media source blaming the Democrats? If you've ever had the pleasure of actually debating with people who think differently than you, you'll find that most people really agree on most issues. Most people are inherently good. Most people want to be generous and kind. And I do not believe that people who voted for Trump do not care about other people. And I don't for a minute believe that they were okay with children being thrown into detention centers. All of us, Democrats, conservatives, all of us have been caught up in a huge marketing campaign. And marketing is all about tapping into emotions of a person and playing on those emotions. And the money that's gone into how political sides are marketing is astounded. So we have this two-party system. We have a Congress that has no term limits. We have no real oversight on media and marketing, all of which have combined to create a perfect storm of us against us. And it doesn't matter if you feel your media is honest and somebody else's is faulty. It only matters that it's turned into this huge issue where we've turned against each other, and it perpetuates anger and has made us to forget that we're in this together. So us against us can only stop when one side stops the anger. So Joe Biden, who was not my choice, but he was as left as I could go, ran on a healing platform. So I'm going to follow suit. He won't be delivering decisive messages, derisive messages. So neither should we. And we have to hear the anger of the Trump voters and not rub their faces in our win, or otherwise it's not a win for anybody. Compassion has to win.
Thank you, Sarah. That's great. Mara Gordon.
Hi. So, hi everybody. So I'm looking forward to talking to Benita later about the ACA, but I am a healthcare worker, and specifically I work with medically fragile and medically complex children. And I'm a physical therapist, and their sessions are long and they're intense, and the parents are a part of them. So over the past 4 years and through my entire career, you get to know your families quite well. And some of them are Trump supporters, and some of them are whether it be Clinton or Biden supporters or Obama. So I have had a lot of conversations in the course of, coaxing some little angry scrap of humanity through their exercises. The parents and I tend to talk a little bit, and I can pretty much argue both sides of all of the major topics, but I am going to come down on the side that benefits me and saves my bacon. And I think everybody does that. So one of the things that I hope I have spent the last 4 years being called a libtard and lazy and like a welfare queen or whatever, because I need the ACA. And I need the ACA because the vast majority of the programs that I work for require you to be an independent contractor. And I happen to have a pre-existing condition related to a birth defect. I've had to buy my own insurance for years, and it was ruinous. And when you see some of the anger of the anti-Trump people, it is fear-based, from not being able to get medical care, from being middle class, hardworking, and not being able to purchase health insurance. I also know there's a flip side to it, particularly for small business, but I've seen that, and I also have concerns in the areas of education. I have 2 kids in college, and guess what? College is ruinous. And to cut it short, I feel like there are some very complex issues plaguing the country right now. And whichever political party makes the very difficult decisions to solve them, and they are solvable, it's going to be political suicide. And I can speak more to that later. And so I feel we're getting played a little bit here, because as long as we're fighting with each other, nothing really has to get done. So who does it benefit to have us so angry with each other? I think we need to take a long, hard look at that.
Okay, thank you, Mara. Benita?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Great, yeah, yes, I do. Okay.
Wonderful. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on this panel. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone. Sounds like some of us will have some interesting conversations, to say the least. Particularly Mara, you and I, because actually we're very much on the same page from what I can tell. With that said, I think that, especially with my evolution from having been independent always, and there's a story behind why I chose to be an independent and not a Democrat, even when I was 18, to becoming more conservative. I'm still an independent because fundamentally I still align a lot with Democrats on many issues, but I'm definitely fiscally conservative. And I think the two takeaways for me is that, one, this election was really all about character, decency versus policy. Fundamentally, I actually think that most of us are relieved, happy to have character, decency restored, but I think that what a lot of people are missing is that character, decency doesn't necessarily pay the bills. And I think that a lot of people recognize that. I think some people really thought about the long-term future of our country, and that was really on a lot of people's minds. I think it's also important that we try not to live in echo chambers. If there's one thing I'd like for people to really understand, it's so important not to live in echo chambers. That is why 2016 happened, and the reaction to 2016 happened the way it did, because so many people lived in echo chambers. I was smart enough not to do that to myself, and that's how I predicted correctly that it would be Trump. I think this year is the first time since 2000 that my prediction was wrong. Political science degree isn't always perfect, it turns out. But I think the other important thing is that we really learn to listen to one another and not define one another based on one vote. I'm seeing so many, quite frankly, I'm seeing this on the left. I'm not seeing this on the right so far. I'm seeing so many people on the left, posting, I'm unfriending you, or I'm not going to be friends anymore with you. To heck with the fact that we had a 5-year friendship. You voted for him, that's it, we're done here. And it's just shocking that anyone would actually do such a thing. And now I also was unfriended after 2016. My law school classmate and I both were, actually, despite the fact that I had actually voted for Hillary. And it's painful, it's hurtful, and I don't necessarily know if it's really necessary. I think that if we continue to just listen to our side and our side only, and we're unwilling to just pause and just, without interruption, hear what the other person's saying, we're never going to be able to understand what motivates people to vote the way they do, and understand that we actually have more in common than it seems, because fundamentally we do have more in common. We all want the same things in life. I truly believe that. I just think that we have different philosophies, big governments versus small government, self-reliance versus dependence, those types of things.
Thank you. Thank you, Benita. And you guys are amazing, and I know we could talk forever. So I'm gonna just sort of bring up some questions, and unfortunately we can't take that much time for each person to respond, but we're gonna get to what we can get to. So this first one is for the Republican panelists. What is and some of you have hit on this, what is the primary misconception that you feel Democrats have about you? And just whoever wants to speak to it.
And I think that's part of what I hit on at the beginning, is the misconception that we don't care, or that we're cold-hearted, or not giving, or whatever. In fact, I pulled it up just before we went live. There in 2018, New York Times article that talked about conservative counties, compared charitable giving, conservative counties and liberal counties, and conservative counties outgave. And of course, I know statistics, you can make statistics say whatever you want them to say. But there's ample evidence out there that Republicans actually really are giving people. And my husband does, when he engages with someone in conversation, that's one of the first things he says. And I think it's really important, is that because of this misconception, he says, I'm going to give you the grace to say that I genuinely think that you care about people and you want to help people. Will you give me the same courtesy? And then now, once you establish that, okay, now we can talk about the effects of different policies and the effects that those policies have on people. But I don't think you can get to the next conversation. I forget who it was that said it. I think it was Sarah, with the whole, if it's all just us versus us, how do you ever even get to the policy conversation if we're all just emotionally making assumptions about other people? It doesn't work.
And Leslie, I'm interested just to hear you talk about this, especially because you had a lifelong friend, a family friend, attack you because you voted for Trump. I mean, what does that mean to her? What does she think that meant about you, this person she's known forever?
Yeah, and it's probably one of the most painful things that has come out of this whole thing, because you can see it on television where, Trump supporters are, just last weekend, they're protesting, in a decent manner, and this elderly gentleman gets just knocked over and knocked to the ground and kicked in the head. Things like that. Obviously, I have a very hard time with that. I think also the misconception that people think that we're racist, or that, I think Sarah had mentioned, that you're okay with kids being in cages, and I'm not okay with a child being in a cage. I'm not okay with, my friend who's a Democrat, she's Black. What? We've taken trips together. We have differences, but we still are able to communicate with one another. I think at the heart, at everybody's heart, we're all good, decent people, but you just need to kind of take a breath and step back and really think about what you're saying. And is this really I would never be okay with seeing a child being caged up or support those type of policies. That's just, so I just wish that we could have a conversation instead of go straight to the screaming.
And Benita, you have an interesting perspective because you've been both. You have voted for Democrats, and now this time you voted for Trump, and you've sounds like you've gotten attacked for both.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that, as a minority, one of the things we're raised on, or the mantra we're raised on, is Republicans are racist, Democrats are for minorities. That is what we're raised on all our lives. And what I've noticed really keenly since 2016 is that's not necessarily the case. Case in point, my experience at the Women's March. When I got that question, and that question was not asked to the white women that were around me, that was a clear indicator of a lot of covert racism, that they assumed wrongly that I was a foreigner just based on my skin. Meanwhile, I have some very good friends of mine from law school who live in arguably what I call Trump country, Republican area in central Pennsylvania. And every time I visited there, it's been really interesting how their family friends always say things like, it's obvious you're an American. You don't have an accent and your mannerisms. Whereas I live in, ultra liberal DC area. And since 2016, I've had some really weird experiences where I'm constantly being asked, if I'm from this country. And I'm just like, hold on a second here. this is a liberal area, supposedly not racist. I'm not getting this vibe. I'm getting a very different vibe. And that definitely is something I've been challenging. Certainly, some of the comments our president-elect has made are examples of covert racism, quite frankly. And, the emphasis on race, rather the obsession on race from Democrats, it really makes us minorities, many of us, feel unseen. It just the focus on that is really making us really question, like, do Democrats see us beyond our color, our skin tone?
And that's everything you're saying is wonderful. Unfortunately, I guess I have to do some policing too.
No worries.
And it's because you all are so wonderful. You could go on and on. I'm going to flip that around and ask the Democratic women here, what do you think Republicans think about Democrats? What's their misconception?
Can I put one in?
Sure.
I get the very strong sense that an awful lot of Republicans think that Democratic people are financially irresponsible, weak, dependent, expecting others to take care of their problems. That's and that's been said directly to me, particularly based on ACA stuff, but other stuff as well. Meanwhile, for myself, I've been self-supporting since I was 17 years old. I've paid for my own education. I don't carry debt. I'm so financially conservative that it's like I wear used, I sell on eBay, I supplement every which way. There are situations where the infrastructure around you can't win. And that was my experience with healthcare, in that I simply couldn't purchase it for less than maybe $60,000 a year. It just was not doable for a situation that I could not control, that I was born with. And that's the reality of all the people in this country with significant pre-existing conditions. So I would just want to say that, yeah, we actually, most of us would like to be wealthy. We have no problem with keeping, with people working hard and keeping a fair percentage of what they've earned. To speak to Karen, yeah, big government it's a problem. It's cumbersome and it's illogical. And some of the programs I work with are less effective because of it. But there are times that the status quo, smaller government or free market fails. And I don't get the sense that there's a clear understanding that might be so for a good many people in this country.
And do any other of the Democratic women here want to answer that question about the misconceptions that Republicans have? And then we're going to move on. Yeah.
So it upsets me a lot that our issues of socialism have been turned into the idea of communism. That's a real misdirection of what people who feel socialist is. Democratic socialism is just having some of the same programs that are like found in Sweden and places like that. It's not this crazy communistic thing that's been turned into a media circus. That's it.
Okay.
Oh, I also want to apologize to my fellow Republicans over there who've been feeling so hit on by my fellow liberals. And, as perplexed as it may seem to you, I think the majority of liberals feel the same way, exactly the same way, which goes back to leading me to the fact that I think that we're all being fed the same thing through a different funnel. But I'm sorry that we've made you feel bad.
And obviously it cuts both ways. We both get that feeling from the other side. And I'm keeping tonight pretty much like not getting into much of the policy stuff, because I don't want us to get into, into those kind of issues. But I will just say, because I'm looking at some of the chats comments, and there are just, people being, making comments about their feelings of how Republicans feel seen, how Democrats feel seen. And some of the comments I'm seeing there are also kind of leading to my next question about news sources, because, we think that most Republicans are, Fox, Newsmax, Washington Times, and that liberals are all about CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC, and that we stay in our bubbles. And, for instance, there's a commenter here who's saying, that maybe of that incident where the elderly man was knocked to the ground, I think that that's also portrayed differently on different media, because some sources showed it as the elderly man knocked to the ground had been aggressively hitting and attacking bystanders for a good 5 minutes before he was knocked down. So there is that bubble. And that's why I want to talk about news sources here. I want to ask everybody on the panel, where do you primarily get your news? Because again, we have that image. I mean, I'm constantly seeing, I am a liberal, and I would say not all, but the majority of my Facebook friends believe the way that I do. And it is upsetting when I see a post about, putting a hit on Fauci, or what is he talking about, or that, there are issues in the country like COVID that really exist. There are issues here. I don't want to get that deeply into it here, but we do still have those issues. But I guess, where do we go with with news sources? How do we start listening to the same news sources maybe, or where can we go for like even-handed commentary? So I'm just going to throw that out to our panelists, because it's a real problem. We all throw that fake news, or that's not true, or, oh my God, look what they're saying or doing now. And, it doesn't help any of us. So I think it would start with where do we and where should we be getting our news from? How do we open our eyes to what's happening on the other side?
I've got a really good suggestion that's easy for everybody. I get a daily email called The Flip Side. It's free. You just sign up for it. It picks a major issue each day, and then it kind of explains the issue, and then it gives from the left perspective and from the right perspective how you're. And I think it's pulled from maybe it's called from editorials that are the most popular or seem to make the most sense. So so every day I get some little tidbit of an issue, and it's got news on both sides, or opinions on both sides.
Allsides.com does something similar, where they do left, right, and center on a regular basis, and you can just look up also and see what the current issues are and where different newspapers and news sources are coming down on the issue. One of the things that I really recommend people do is, if they're finding there are disputes within their family or friends about what is real, is to do kind of a news challenge together and agree to either trade out, like I'm going to watch your news for a week and you watch my news for a week and then let's talk, or to watch the news together and watch one person's favorite news and then watch the other person's favorite news and talk it through. And the kinds of questions I encourage people to talk about aren't about facts, but rather about approach. What is it that you like about this type of news? What appeals to you? What do you think might be problematic? And what do you like about the other sources that I'm offering? And can we see that there might be advantages to both of them and disadvantages to both of them? Getting kind of meta in our thinking about the news can be really powerful, and it can be a helpful way to build bridges, to realize the ways in which, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, the news is to some extent manipulating you.
Okay. I think that's a good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say,
go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. I was gonna say, also I agree about All Sides. All Sides is terrific. Karen, I love or maybe I said your name wrong, Corinne?
That's right, Karen.
Okay, good. I was going to say that I really like your idea as well. News challenge also sounds like a lot of fun. What I was going to add is also look at sources outside of our big three media, if you will, or mainstream media, and go to sources such as BBC America, go to Al Jazeera America. These are sources that aren't really going to be so heavily biased one way or the other. So you get a much more broader perspective, including even better international coverage as well. It also gives you a greater sense of how our media is portrayed and viewed internationally, and also how our country is viewed internationally. So I would really recommend staying away from mainstream media because both Fox and CNN are very biased.
And most of our listeners, or many of them, can't understand how a woman can vote for Trump, given his history, his attitude toward us. I've had lots of Biden voters say to me, I can understand voting for a Republican, but Trump is a whole different category. So can members of the panel share their viewpoints on this?
I'd be happy to. One of the biggest reasons I voted for Trump is that he's pro-life and he appoints conservative judges. So looking at it from a policy perspective, because I think we had the same conversation with when Bill Clinton was running, right? All the affairs and all the stuff that happened with Bill Clinton, and people would say, well, how can women vote for Bill Clinton? So I don't think that character issue is something new, right? I think that we deal with that all the time. And so with Trump, I had to look at it and I had to say, I can't in good conscience vote for a candidate that's not pro-life. I'm not voting for him to date my daughter. I wouldn't vote for him to date my daughter. And so I also think that, again, media coverage can be what media coverage can be, right? And if you selectively, depending on what you listen to, that really can affect your opinion of someone. So for me, it came down to policies. It really came down to policies, and that I agreed with, not all. You're never going to find a candidate that you agree with 100%, or else it would be you, right? But one of the things, can I just comment real quick on the news source thing? One of the things that I really, in my government class, my students have to do a current events thing every each class meeting. And I always tell them to try to, look at different sources and stuff. But one of the things I always tell them to watch out for is what language people are using. And you can tell somebody's perspective almost immediately just from the word choice, right? That if they call it Obamacare, they're going to be against it. And if they call it Affordable Care Act, they're going to be in favor of it. And so I think learning that as we watch various news sources, that will help. Like you can kind of get somebody's perspective simply by the word choice that they use. So,
and I think that we have to make it our business to fact check things,
mm-hmm.
not just
absolutely,
because that's a huge problem and leads to so much animosity.
And watch the whole video. Not the 20-second, either way, right? You can, and the news media can pick 20 seconds from any video and get you to think a certain way.
And of course, reading newspapers, making our own judgments about things.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, since that comment was directed towards me about the gentleman that was beat up by Antifa, he was surrounded by Antifa. And there were several different incidences last weekend where it was shown on video. It wasn't, this man was like 75 years old. He wasn't out hitting Antifa. He was trying to get away. So I think, to set it up, well, he deserved it. Nobody deserves to be thrown down to the ground. And that man wasn't out there hitting other people. And I saw another one that was thrown over on his motorbike, and they wouldn't let him up, and somebody took his phone and stole it and laughed as they did it. Like that kind of stuff to me it's unacceptable, whether you're on the right or the left.
There are excesses on both sides, and none of
I'm not okay with either.
Helpful. None of on either side. It's not anything that is helpful.
So as a Biden voter, can I jump in and say that in terms of how can anyone vote for Trump? I'm going to say, I think we Dems need to get off our high horses. You vote for the person who speaks to your needs. I think there's a lot of people hurting in this country. I think across this entire panel and the people watching, the experience is people working harder and harder for less and less a return, or their children are sliding, whatever. And so if a candidate speaks to the needs and you believe them, you're going to vote for them. And who cares what he said 9 years ago about, you know, whatever. And I think that both sides of the aisle will do that. I think we need to stop deciding why the opposing side acted the way they did. And in any number of my conversations that I have online, I'll say, if you want to know how a Democrat thinks, why don't you just ask me? I'm right here. Nobody ever does, but we need to, you know, instead of saying, well, Republicans think blah, or Democrats, like, just ask. We're all lurking, you know, we're all lurking. So
also, it comes back to compassion. It's so important. My husband, am I here?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know if you, my husband likes to get on Facebook and just snarl at people about being Republicans, and some of his friends will come on and say something, and every once in a while I'll go in there and, you know, say something nice. And, you know, often some of his friends will say stuff like, oh, you silly girl, why don't you shut the fuck up? And instead of getting angry, I actually sit there and I talk to them and I make sure they understand they can't upset me, because they're not upset with me. They're upset with something else. And they need to know I understand that. They need to know we understand that there's an anger and a pain going on. And we need to address that. And we can't get mad at it, or it continues.
So what are the most important issue or issues that determine which candidates you back?
Healthcare.
You know, Mara, I think that's really interesting. And I apologize, Sherry, was that just to the Biden supporters?
No, all of you, everybody.
Because my experience with the ACA was the complete opposite. I lost my health insurance. I don't have health insurance anymore because of the ACA. So I think that's really interesting that we have completely opposite effects of the same law.
I think it might matter what state you're in, because I'm in New York, and there is a pathway to healthcare for everyone now.
Well, I could get it, but I fall into that category of you know, I make too much to I don't want the subsidies anyways, but I would make too much to qualify for any subsidies.
I don't get a subsidy.
Yet it's extremely expensive, you know.
Mara, you're making great points, but we're not going to do the crosstalk.
Okay.
No, I just thought it was interesting that we had a very opposite perspective. That's all.
Yeah. I think what people didn't realize is that for people like me prior to the ACA, and we're talking like 10, 12 years ago, so do the math on inflation. If I wanted to get healthcare for my relatively healthy family of 4, except for one little niggling orthopedic condition, it was over $4,000 a month, and that's not including anything. So when people now gripe about how expensive their healthcare is, the people out there, and there's like 32 million of us, with pre-existing conditions and jobs that don't supply benefits, say, you have no clue. You have no clue how bad it was.
So I want to ask everybody here, what sort of country do you hope to see the United States become for our children and grandchildren?
Somewhere where we're actually working together better, and that we're making the world a better place for our kids, thinking about the environment.
I'd like to see us regain our sense of humor.
I'd like to see one where we're civil to one another.
I just want for the children of the future that are growing up now to have a future, you know.
I would say that our basic freedoms continue to be upheld. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all of those things, you know, that our founders held dear. I would like to see those continue to be upheld. Because that's what, you know, to me, like when I think America, I think freedom.
Yeah, and as I said, I just don't want to this is not about getting too deeply into issues here tonight, because I'm also watching a lot of the chat people there, and we're creating bridges tonight, because I think we're seeing bridges. But I just interrupted someone who was going to speak on our panel. I apologize.
Oh, I think it was me.
Okay.
I'm a doctor by training. I was doing kind of the stay-at-home mom thing up until the 2016 election, and I sort of left politics. And after the 2016 election, I decided I needed to go back into the fray, and it was really to achieve two things. One, as I saw it, was to save democracy, and the other was to save the planet. And that's what I have at the forefront of my mind every single day.
I'm wondering how many do all our panel members have children? Because I have two, and they're in their 20s, early 20s, and they are terrified. I think that I think they've been somewhat manipulated, but they are terrified that the planet is not going to be sustainable within the next 30, 40 years. They are seriously debating whether they should have children or not. And whatever your opinion is on whether this is true or not, they believe it with all their heart.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I have 4. 3 are adults and 1 still in high school.
How are they feeling?
Yeah. And these issues they're about our lives. They're about our future. And that's a major reason why it hits so hard. Like climate change is certainly a big one and I don't even just want to say for Democrats, because I don't want to just keep the separation thing. And that's why I think this is about, bridge building. So I guess I just do want to ask some of the Republican candidates here for, I guess each side, and I still hate to use sides, but how do we start not just automatically saying, oh, climate change doesn't exist or doesn't whatever, or this, that, or this, that. I guess kind of looking into the bridging aspect. How do we start doing that?
I think we absolutely have to start listening to the younger generation. Our parties, neither party addresses the concerns of the younger generation. Our kids went out to vote, but the majority of the kids that I know, and those are both in South Carolina and in New York, felt let down by both parties. They felt like neither party was addressing their issues. And the only reason that many of them ended up voting at all was because they wanted somebody to take care of COVID. They're frightened about COVID. And people who hated Biden suddenly decided, well, we'll vote for Biden because at least he's going to take care of COVID in their mind. So I think it's very important that our parties start addressing what the children, the youth want. We're out of touch.
Right. And just, is there anything that anybody on our panel is viewing a little bit differently? I mean, again, you're on this panel because you're already open and enlightened somewhat, right? So anybody seeing anything a little bit differently, or where do we start going from here?
I'm just happy you called conservatives open and enlightened. We don't get that. We don't get that very often.
Well, I mean, because I think everybody just coming on this panel showed an openness. Just coming on this panel. And I mean that from both sides, because when I was posting on Facebook, I was getting it definitely for, again, most of my Facebook friends are, liberals. And I was like, I can't, I have to heal first. And some of the Republican women I talked to said the same thing. Everyone is so hurt. Everyone is just so hurt. So just, is there anything that you're looking at a little bit differently tonight after hearing the other side? Anybody?
I'd just like to say that I've never voted because of a party, ever. And I'm 76, and in all the years that I've had the privilege to vote, I might call myself my whole family. I grew up as a Republican, and when I designated Democrat, I'm sure my ancestors were causing a great earthquake in the cemetery, rolling over in their graves. But
Thank you.
I got to the point where I just said, I'm an independent because I never vote a straight ticket. I will not vote for a position if I don't know anything about that person. And I don't care if they're a Republican or a Democrat or a Green Party or a whatever. I just, like you said, we tend to vote for those that are answering the questions that are most personal to us.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I think that it's a good segue maybe to a few questions from
Well, first, I just wanted to have Simra Sinj say a few words. Simra?
And do we know, can you introduce Simra?
Simra, yeah, she's very, well, if we're seeing each other in the same order, Simra, can you raise your hand? She's in white. Simran. Yes, Simran Sinj. Okay. Yes, you just raised her hand. Okay.
Unmute herself.
Yes, it's been a wonderful discussion, and I want to share from a place of oneness and seeing all of this from a bigger picture.
And I just wanted to say, Simran, she's a radio host at Voice America's 1111 Talk Radio who advocates for unity, compassion, and humanity. She did a TEDx talk, Conversations with the Universe. So I guess just what are you thinking after hearing everybody here today?
Well, I think all of the opinions are really valuable, and that is when we are entrenched in what we're seeing and what we're needing based on who we are. I share the signs of how life speaks to us. And so although our country appears very divided, if we really look at it, the election results reflect balance. We're yin and yang, red and blue. Biden is our healing, and Trump was equally our healing. Trump is number 45. That's a number that's symbolic of endings, tough love, spiritual awakening, and karma. The 2016 election illustrated masculine against feminine and the subsequent loss of the feminine. Trump's tenure catalyzed the shadowy undercurrent in our country, giving focus to things like Me Too, racism, Black Lives Matter, brutality, right to life, and truth versus lie. President Biden is number 46. That's a number for new beginnings, foundations, morals, values, and integrity. He illustrated masculine aligning with feminine through Vice President Harris, which is a shift into feminine balancing. This doesn't speak to issues, but it speaks to energy. The Senate and the House represent the two sides of our brain, our governing faculty. These must partner as one mind for balance and alignment. The left is intuitive and feminine, the right logical and masculine. Life is not about men, women, red or blue, you or me. There's a bigger picture of equilibrating and balancing energy, because everything is energy. Life's biological intelligence brought COVID-19 to support our healing. Corona means crown, head, or mind, and our minds are infected with fear and division. Our inner houses are at odds, and Mother Nature sent us inside to reflect on who we've become. The masks are a blatant symbol of the invisible masks we wear to divide from one another. It's also a signal to be quiet and to listen, so I applaud this discussion. COVID creates an affect to the lungs, which equates to unconscious grief. Loss of taste and smell are symbols of losing our common sense and intuitive faculties. And we as the feminine are here to feel, to deeply feel the heartbreak and the feelings that rise when these things happen before we act. We are the healing, and this is what healing looks like. Creating resistance and interference by fighting life's transitions only makes things more painful. And by finding neutrality first within ourselves when these disruptions happen, we can then go with a calm, compassionate mind and heart to really listen to the person in front of us. Anything someone is saying is really their own projection of who they are. It has nothing to do with us. It's not personal. And yet it is, because we're a collective body. We are conduits of transformation, and we need to engage in right thought, right word, and right action with one another so that we can clear the stagnant energy and emotional debris. And if we do that, especially as women, we can work together to get out of our heads and into our hearts, and we can let life have a chance to balance our messes. Trust life's plan, because alchemy is present. The one thing that happened is patriotism rose. More people voted than ever before, and we live in a democracy where every voice counts. And we need to revel in that balance. Being the cure instead of the virus means reestablishing trust with each other, healing our relationships, reclaiming ourselves, anchoring in our compassion and kindness, listening, holding a unified vision, and partnering with life. And through our individual mastery and neutrality, we will strengthen the focus and vision of this country. We will create communication and connection, and then be able to unite with generosity of spirit and unconditional love to create true change. But we have to understand that we are in this world, but we're not of it. We have to be willing to sometimes rise above the issues and see the big picture, and rise below the issues and feel the shadow and the feelings that exist. I appreciate every single voice that was here. It's powerful, it's beautiful, and I applaud you all for sharing and feeling and expressing, because it's only through expressing what we're feeling and what we're going through can we truly come together. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, because Jeannie Ralston and I were talking yesterday about how do we try to bring this forward. And I'm a member of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, sospeace.org, SOSS peace.org, which I first read about from an article at Next Drive, actually. And it's an organization that's devoted to bringing Muslim and Jewish women together to build bridges and fight hate and prejudice and negative stereotyping. And right before the coronavirus shut us all down, I went with some members from the sisterhood on a trip to the Tucson border, which was just illuminating. And I want to throw this out to Jeannie and our fabulous panel and Simran. How can we use tonight to start knocking down those walls and start building bridges between Democrats and Republicans?
And I will just insert here quickly, and I want to get everyone, but I do want to, I am thinking, we were going to take questions from the audience.
Yes, we were.
But it's like, it's getting late, and I think Simran tied it up so well. Plus, I want to keep this conversation going. I don't want this to be the last one. And I also thought there's a sisterhood of Shalom Salam, and they work by small groups across the country, 6 Jewish women, 6 Muslim women in these small groups across the country. And it's changing the world through friendship. And I'm wanting to, Sherry and I were talking about this. Is there a model for this kind of, like, I'm thinking the Purple Sisterhood or something, is that we get into small groups and in our area where we meet women from other viewpoints, and we have we continue in smaller groups these kind of conversations with, there's some guidelines, but this is the kind of thing that I'm thinking, and Sherry and I talked about. So I will be, all of you who are listening, I will be writing and getting some feedback on whether you'd be interested in doing something like that. But we could, I'm also open to hearing other ideas from our panelists of maybe things we could do, and whether something like this Purple Sisterhood makes sense. So, all right. What about Sarah? Sarah, what do you think we can do to move forward from this?
Well, after listening to Simran speak, I think we should just all go and read her stuff and listen to her. I'm serious. She's
amazing. Yeah.
You know, one thing that's important is before we start attacking people, I do think we should look at their parents, or if they're children. I mean, if they're parents, we should look at their children's, because the apples don't fall far from the trees. And I know Simran's mom, and she's one of the most amazing people I've met. And that's just something we need to think about before we start judging people.
Can I say, I think we also need to walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah.
I'd love to add that if we can ask those across the aisle, not what they think, but ask them how they feel. Tell me how your heart is. Tell me what you need. Rather than asking them what they think, we need to drop out of the head and into the heart. We need to drop down and in, all of us, whatever affiliation we are, we need to drop down and in and find our humanity and have other people access theirs.
Thank you, Sarah, for bringing Simran to me and to us.
My claim to fame.
Yes.
If I can add something.
Yes.
After 2016, a lot of cities across the country started seeing dinner circles where people would gather together and talk about the issues from the left and the right. Not so much the independent middle, but maybe that's something we could maybe look forward to doing post-COVID, because I don't know whether that would be something very practical right now, unless in a virtual capacity like this one. But that's something that a lot of people have tried doing.
Yeah, there are a number of organizations that are doing this right now. The biggest would be livingroomconversations.com. They're doing tons of virtual meetings across the country, and then there's also Braver Angels that actively brings together people from the right, left, and potentially middle as well.
Braverangels.com?
.org.
.org. Okay. I'll look at that. Okay. These are great.
And I do love Jeannie's idea of doing this as like a woman thing, woman to woman on the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom model, small groups, chapters they're called. And it's about you first get to know each other. It's not like to dive into, so how could you vote for whatever, getting to know each other and see the humanity and working together on projects. And then you don't kind of get into the tough stuff until you have that foundation of respect and caring.
I think one of the things my husband did in a previous office is they would have what they call the lunch bunch. And he found there was a guy that was, opposite. My husband's a Republican. This guy was a Democrat. And my husband just said, you know what? Each day, we're going to just have a limited time where we're going to pick one issue. And we're just going to go back and forth on that one issue, all in a very respectful, they were coworkers and respectful of each other. And so they were able to set us, it's almost like they kind of carved out this little time where they would discuss the issue. But the rest of the time they were coworkers and friends. And so it really gave them the opportunity of almost like, okay, we're going not in the ring, so to speak, because they didn't approach it from an antagonistic perspective. But it like set this boundary of here's where we're going to talk about these issues. But then the rest of the time, we can be friends and get to know each other and whatever. So I think that's kind of neat. And I like the idea of getting to know people before you just jump in and tell them, everything that you're thinking and everything that's wrong with them. Right.
Exactly.
And I say that I've learned so much from the other side, and I really appreciate you guys coming. I think it's brave of you, considering how my husband attacks Republicans right now. And I also want to just say one more thing. Let's all just lead with kindness and make our decisions based on kindness. That's going to make the world so much better.
And so I guess, Jeannie, where do we go from here now? Yeah.
Well, what I'll do, I'm going to follow up everybody here and maybe ask a few questions and kind of get a sense of what people.
I just saw someone, Cindy Neisinger. I'm probably butchering your name, and I apologize. She said, "What is our hashtag so we can communicate a movement?"
So that's what I'm going to do when I follow up with the email to everyone and kind of get some feedback. And I want to just end with, I had my brother is very much on the other side politically, and we had a conversation 2 days ago where we sat and he says he communicate, find out what we're both after, and he said a lot of times we're both after the same thing. It's just we come at it different ways, and so that it helps a lot. If like we both want, I don't have an example on top of my mind, but kind of like there's a lot we share in like the desired result, but somebody might be coming at it like even abortion. We don't like abortion, but we want to decrease the number of abortions. So there's different ways of getting to that point. So, and we can work on, there's a lot we can do to get together to get to the desired result. So I think that to me is, we can really start with what we have in common because we have more in common than I think that separate us, and that's humanity. And we are women who've lived, we've been through at our age, we've been through a lot, we've suffered, we've triumphed, all of that. So I think there's a lot to bring us together, and that's what I'm hoping for. So I also want to say that we will make it, this has been recorded. I'm going to also, when I send out the email, I'll get to link to this so you can watch it. And Sherry's going to write a story based on this, correct? Right?
I will.
Yeah. I thought, and she also, it's going to, the audio recording is going to be on her podcast called Therapy. And so I'm going to take us out. But before I do that, I want to just put your link to Therapy, Sherry.
It's Therapy. Oh my God, this is where my chemo.
No, I'm getting it.
Therapy with Sherry and Mattenstein. Yeah. While Jeannie is getting that up to give me some self-promotion, I just also wanted to say, I put down in the chats, SOSS.org is the Sisterhood of Shalom's website. And someone also said, what's our hashtag? So I think what Jeannie said, hashtag Purple Sisterhood. I kind of like that.
Well, yeah, and we can always be open to that. But I definitely thank all, and Sherry, thank you so much for your idea of this and for making it happen. And thank you to all the panelists to being brave. I didn't know who would want to do this, but I'm glad you did. And everybody here who's been watching, and I hope your hearts have grown bigger, or at least your horizons. And wow, and beautiful. Wait, what's your name? Who just spoke?
Imran.
Beautiful. I have just loved that, and it's all a new way of thinking, and you've opened us up very much too. So I think that's about it. But I say stay tuned, because we're going to do more, right?
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for coming tonight. And see, everybody was saying, oh my God, thank God that it's virtual because they kill each other. And I'm like, we were great,
Thank you, Jeannie and Sherry.
We rock.
You good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.